He stood at the pinnacle of success, a self-made billionaire whose groundbreaking innovations in technology promised to change the world. His name was a symbol of ambition and wealth, celebrated across Miami's elite circles. Journalists praised him as a visionary, and his peers envied his unmatched drive. From sprawling oceanfront mansions to high-profile charity galas, his life appeared to be a portrait of perfection. A man who had everything: power, wealth, influence, and a loving fiancée by his side. She was more than his partner. She was his confidant, his muse, the woman who brought light to his extravagant yet meticulously controlled world. Together, they were Miami's golden couple, envied for their glamorous lifestyle and unbreakable bond. To everyone watching, they seemed untouchable, invincible, the very embodiment of success. But the truth was far more complex. In the shadows of their carefully curated image, cracks began to form. Subtle at first, whispers of unexplained absences, cryptic conversations, and a growing distance that even close friends could not ignore. Then, one day, she stumbled upon something she was never meant to see. Documents, photos, conversations that painted a picture too horrifying to comprehend. Evidence that shattered her world in an instant. She was faced with a choice: confront the man she loved or expose the truth and risk everything. What followed was a sequence of events so tragic, so shocking, that it would unravel not just her life, but the lives of countless others. By the time it was over, Miami would find itself grappling with questions no one wanted to answer. How could a man so admired, so trusted, be linked to one of the most despicable crimes imaginable? And how far would he go to ensure his secrets stayed buried? This is the story of ambition, betrayal, and the cost of uncovering the truth. A story of a man who believed his power made him untouchable and the woman who dared to challenge him. To the outside world, William Reyes was a name synonymous with progress and philanthropy. As the CEO of one of Miami's most successful tech companies, he was celebrated as a visionary leader who had turned his innovative ideas into a billion-dollar empire. He was often seen gracing magazine covers, attending charity galas, and delivering speeches about his mission to make the world a better place. His charm was magnetic, his intellect sharp, and his rise to the top seemed unstoppable. At his side was Elena Vasquez, a rising star in the world of social media and an advocate for animal welfare. Her followers adored her for her warmth and authenticity, qualities that set her apart in the often superficial world of influencers. She seemed to live a charmed life, sharing glimpses of their glamorous relationship. Private jets, extravagant vacations, and candlelit dinners overlooking the Miami skyline. To those who watched from afar, they were the perfect couple, a modern-day fairy tale. But all of that changed on a warm summer evening. On July 15th, emergency responders were called to the couple's waterfront estate after a frantic 911 call reported a tragic accident. By the time paramedics arrived, it was already too late. Elena Vasquez, just 28 years old, was pronounced dead at the scene. Initial reports suggested a fall from the balcony, a heartbreaking yet plausible explanation given the circumstances. Her death sent shockwaves through Miami's social and tech elite. The news was splashed across every headline, with friends and fans mourning the loss of a vibrant young woman taken far too soon. Tributes poured in, painting Elena as a kind-hearted, passionate soul who had so much more to give. William, visibly shaken, issued a public statement expressing his grief and love for her, a moment that tugged at the heartstrings of millions. But as the weeks went by, whispers began to emerge. Whispers that her death may not have been an accident after all. A closer look at the events leading up to that night raised questions that couldn't be ignored. Why had Elena recently canceled several appearances without explanation? Why had she confided in a close friend that she had uncovered something disturbing? And why did William seem unusually composed during the days that followed her death? The turning point came when an anonymous source came forward, claiming to have knowledge of what Elena had discovered just weeks before her death. The details that surfaced would not only cast doubt on the official cause of her death, but also uncover a chilling link between William Reyes and an international human trafficking operation. An operation that thrived under the guise of his billion-dollar empire. This wasn't just the story of a tragic loss. It was the unraveling of a web of lies, power, and betrayal. A case that revealed the darkest corners of privilege and ambition. Elena Vasquez grew up far from the glittering lights of Miami's tech world. Born in a modest neighborhood in Orlando, she was raised by hardworking parents who instilled in her a sense of compassion and determination. From a young age, Elena stood out, not for her beauty, though it was undeniable, but for her ability to connect with people. She had a way of making everyone she met feel seen and valued. By her mid-20s, Elena had carved out her own corner of the digital world as a rising influencer. Her focus on animal welfare and environmental causes drew a loyal following, not just for her message but for the authenticity she brought to it. Her fans admired her as someone who used her platform for good, leveraging her growing popularity to raise awareness and funds for causes she cared deeply about. It was during one of these charity events that she first crossed paths with William Reyes. To Elena, he was magnetic, intelligent, confident, and generous. Their connection was instant, a whirlwind romance that swept her into a life she could never have imagined. In just a few months, she went from advocating for endangered sea turtles to attending exclusive galas, dining with celebrities, and traveling to private islands on William's jet. Their relationship quickly became the subject of envy and admiration. Paparazzi captured moments of them holding hands on the red carpet, laughing at high-end restaurants, and whispering to each other during press events. Friends described their dynamic as electric. Elena often gushed about William's brilliance, saying he had a way of making the impossible seem attainable. But for those closest to Elena, the story wasn't as seamless as it appeared. Behind her radiant smile and glowing social media posts, a few friends began to notice subtle changes in her demeanor. She became less accessible, canceling plans last minute or responding to messages with vague excuses. When they did see her, there was an undercurrent of unease she tried to mask but couldn't fully hide. One friend later recalled a moment that stood out. A seemingly insignificant comment William made during a dinner party. Elena had playfully teased him about his obsessive work habits, to which he responded with a tight smile and a single line that silenced the room. "You don't always need to understand what I do, Elena. You just need to trust me." The friend brushed it off at the time, but in hindsight, it felt like the first sign of something deeper, something they couldn't quite name. As the months went on, cracks in the relationship began to widen. William's charm, which had initially seemed effortless, started to feel more like a carefully maintained mask. He became increasingly controlling, insisting on knowing Elena's every move, monitoring her communications under the guise of protecting her. Though she pushed back at times, it became clear that her independence, the very quality William had once admired, was something he could no longer tolerate. Still, Elena stayed. Whether it was out of love, fear, or a mix of both, no one knows for sure. What is certain, however, is that the woman who once radiated confidence and joy was beginning to fade. And then, one day, she told a close friend something that would haunt them forever. "I think I found something I wasn't supposed to see." Elena's suspicions began with a single, unremarkable moment. An ordinary day that would set off a chain reaction she could never escape. While using William's laptop to pull up an email for their upcoming vacation, she stumbled upon a folder she hadn't seen before. The title was innocuous, labeled Financial Projections. Curious, she clicked. What she found didn't make sense at first. Wire transfers to shell companies with obscure names, large sums of money routed to offshore accounts, and a list of properties scattered across international locations. None of these were tied to William's public ventures. Confused but not yet alarmed, she saved the folder to a USB drive, thinking she'd ask him about it later. But over the next few weeks, more fragments of the puzzle emerged. She intercepted strange emails on his phone, encrypted messages with vague references to inventory and shipments. One night, while searching for her passport in his office, she uncovered photographs of young women. Faces she didn't recognize, all of them cataloged with dates and locations. When she confronted William about one of the emails, his reaction was immediate and uncharacteristic. A cold dismissal, followed by a sharp warning not to meddle in his affairs. For Elena, the warnings only deepened her resolve. She began piecing the clues together in secret, reaching out to a trusted friend for advice. As she dug deeper, the horrifying picture became clear. William's empire wasn't just built on technology and innovation. Hidden beneath the surface of his billion-dollar company was a clandestine network, an operation that trafficked vulnerable women across borders under the guise of high-profile investments and charity initiatives. Then came the night of July 15th. Earlier that evening, Elena had called her closest friend, her voice shaking as she spoke. She told them she'd found enough evidence to go to the authorities, but she was afraid of what William might do if he found out. She ended the call abruptly, saying she would explain everything the next day. At 11:45 p.m., a chilling series of events unfolded. Surveillance footage later retrieved from the couple's waterfront estate captured Elena standing on the balcony, pacing back and forth, clutching her phone. Moments later, William entered the frame. They appeared to argue, his gestures sharp, her movements defensive. Then the footage cut off. At 12:03 a.m., a 911 call was placed. William's voice was calm, measured, as he reported that Elena had fallen from the balcony while they were talking about their future. Paramedics arrived to find her lifeless body sprawled on the manicured lawn below. The initial autopsy listed her death as accidental, a tragic misstep during a late-night conversation. But the friend Elena had called earlier that evening couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. When they contacted authorities and shared what Elena had told them, the investigation took a dramatic turn. Detectives obtained a warrant to search Williams' devices and properties. What they found sent shockwaves through the Miami elite. Encrypted files detailing years of transactions, records of falsified visas, and communications with known figures in the trafficking underworld. Perhaps the most chilling discovery came in the form of hidden compartments in some of the luxury homes tied to William's name. Beneath the polished marble floors and sparkling chandeliers, investigators uncovered secret rooms designed to imprison and conceal. These homes, once symbols of wealth and success, were revealed to be the epicenters of unimaginable suffering. The story was no longer just about the tragic death of a beloved influencer. It was about the dismantling of a global operation, the exposure of one man's monstrous double life, and the ultimate price Elena Vasquez paid for uncovering the truth. In the days following Elena's death, the Miami Police Department issued a preliminary statement. The tragic fall appeared to be nothing more than a freak accident. The case was closed quickly, with authorities citing a lack of evidence to suggest foul play. To the public, the story seemed tragically simple. A young woman's life cut short in a moment of misfortune. But for those who knew Elena best, the explanation didn't add up. Her family, devastated and confused, began questioning the official narrative. Elena had always been cautious, particularly when it came to heights. Her closest friends remembered her refusing to lean over balcony railings, even in social settings. They couldn't accept that she had simply fallen, not without something more to the story. Adding to the unease was William's behavior. While his public statements were measured and grief-stricken, those who interacted with him behind closed doors described a man eerily composed, even detached. At Elena's memorial service, several attendees noticed how he avoided direct conversations about her death, deflecting questions and offering vague condolences. To some, it seemed like he was performing the role of a grieving fiancé rather than living it. It wasn't long before Elena's friends took matters into their own hands. One of her closest confidants, a friend who had spoken to her just hours before her death, took matters into their own hands. One of her closest confidants, a friend who had spoken to her just hours before her death, approached a local journalist with the details Elena had shared. The journalist, known for her investigative work, began digging into the CEO's background and connections, uncovering inconsistencies that reignited interest in the case. Under mounting public pressure, law enforcement reopened the investigation, this time taking a closer look at the events leading up to that fateful night. The turning point came when digital forensic experts analyzed Williams' personal devices. Among the encrypted files recovered from his laptop was a chilling email chain that outlined the logistics of what could only be described as a trafficking network. Phrases like shipment schedules and client preferences left little room for misinterpretation. But the most damning piece of evidence was buried in a series of bank transactions, payments made to individuals and organizations already under investigation for human trafficking. The financial trail painted a stark picture. Williams' tech empire was not just funding innovation, it was funding exploitation. The more investigators uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Properties owned by William across Miami and abroad were tied to cases of missing persons. Witness testimonies from former employees revealed a pattern of intimidation and secrecy, with many too fearful to speak out until now. One whistleblower described a private wing in the company's headquarters, accessible only to a select few, where meetings were held under heavy security. By this point, William's name was no longer associated with philanthropy and progress. It was tied to something far darker, a global trafficking operation that had flourished under the protection of wealth, power, and prestige. What had begun as a closed case of accidental death had transformed into a sprawling investigation that threatened to upend not only William's empire but also the lives of those complicit in his crimes. And yet, even as investigators pieced together the damning evidence, one question remained unanswered. What had truly happened on the night of Elena's death? Was it a confrontation gone wrong, or a calculated act to ensure her silence forever? As the investigation closed in, William's carefully constructed world began to collapse. The facade of Miami's visionary tech mogul was replaced by the image of a man under siege. His once unassailable empire now the focus of an international scandal. On the morning of October 8, 6:15 a.m., law enforcement carried out a coordinated raid on William's luxury penthouse. Helicopters circled the skies, blocking any chance of escape, as tactical teams entered the building. Witnesses described the scene as surreal. A man who had once graced the covers of magazines, now being escorted out in handcuffs, his face blank, his movements robotic. The arrest sent shockwaves through Miami's elite, leaving those closest to him scrambling to distance themselves. But the real drama unfolded months later in the courtroom. The trial became one of the most highly publicized cases in recent history, with cameras capturing every moment of the proceedings. Prosecutors presented damning evidence. A meticulous trail of bank transactions, encrypted communications, and testimony from victims who had been trafficked through William's network. Their stories were haunting, revealing the sheer scale of his operation and the unimaginable suffering it had caused. One victim, identified only as Maria, delivered a tearful testimony, recounting how she had been lured with promises of a better life, only to find herself trapped in a nightmare. Her courage in facing William in court was met with an outpouring of public support, turning her into a symbol of resilience in the face of unimaginable cruelty. Yet, even as the evidence mounted, questions lingered. Investigators uncovered evidence suggesting William wasn't acting alone. Email chains hinted at a network of collaborators, powerful individuals who had helped protect the operation in exchange for financial gain. But when questioned, William refused to name names, maintaining a calculated silence that left many wondering how deep the conspiracy ran. Another unsettling question haunted the trial. Could Elena's death have been prevented? Her friends and family pointed to the early signs. The controlling behavior, the subtle threats that had been dismissed or overlooked. For them, the trial wasn't just about seeking justice for the trafficking victims. It was about honoring Elena's legacy and ensuring her bravery in exposing the truth wasn't forgotten. In the end, William was found guilty on multiple charges, including human trafficking, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he was led away from the courtroom, his expression remained cold, unflinching. A man who had lost everything but refused to reveal the full extent of his crimes. But for those left in the wake of his destruction, the story was far from over. Questions remained unanswered. Who else was involved? How many lives had been affected by his actions? And perhaps most chillingly, could there still be fragments of his operation running in the shadows? For the people of Miami, and for those who had once admired William's rise to power, the case served as a grim reminder of the darkness that can hide behind even the most glittering facades. It was a story of betrayal, loss, and unimaginable cruelty, but also one of courage, resilience, and the pursuit of justice. As investigators closed in on the truth, one question echoed in the minds of everyone following the case. What could drive a man to take such drastic measures? William's rise to power had been a story of ambition, wealth, and charm. But beneath that public persona was something far more complex. What led him to kill the woman he claimed to love? Was it the fear of exposure, the pressure of his empire crumbling, or was there something more insidious at play? What do you think? Could it have been a moment of rage? A passionate argument that escalated beyond his control? Or was this calculated from the very start? A desperate attempt to silence Elena before she could reveal the full scope of his criminal empire? Let us know your theories in the comments below. As the trial unfolded, the evidence against William grew more damning. But even with so much stacked against him, a lingering question remained. Could Elena's death have been prevented if authorities had acted sooner? Her friends and family had raised alarms about William's behavior long before the tragedy struck. Had they been more forceful in their suspicions? Could the chain of events have been interrupted before it spiraled to its deadly conclusion? The more the investigators uncovered, the more unsettling the case became. Authorities initially thought they had seen it all, but what they discovered next left even seasoned professionals speechless. In a hidden compartment beneath one of William's properties, they found something truly horrifying. A series of journals, meticulously kept, chronicling his activities in great detail. Inside, there were names of other influential individuals connected to the trafficking ring, many of them untouchable by law. Could there be more powerful figures involved? And if so, were they still operating in the shadows? As the puzzle pieces started to fall into place, it became clear that this was no ordinary case. There were too many unanswered questions, too many layers yet to be uncovered. The true extent of the conspiracy seemed to stretch beyond the boundaries of Miami, hinting at a far-reaching network that, for now, remains mostly in the dark. But one thing was undeniable. Elena's death had been the key that unlocked this shocking chapter of corruption and exploitation. What do you think? Was she just a victim caught in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was her murder the result of her courage in uncovering a web of secrets too dangerous to expose? As we continue to uncover the details, the full story of William's empire is still unfolding. What's next in this chilling case? Stay with us, and remember to subscribe, as we dig deeper into the shocking twists that no one saw coming. As the trial came to an end and the gavel fell, the case of William, the billionaire CEO, seemed to be reaching its conclusion. But for the people closest to Elena, for her friends, family, and the victims whose lives were destroyed by his empire, the story was far from over. Elena was more than just a name in the headlines. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a rising star in the social media world. Known for her warmth, her kindness, and her deep sense of empathy, Elena had a magnetic presence. Those who knew her spoke about how she used her platform to spread positivity, raise awareness for causes close to her heart, and connect with her ever-growing community of followers. She had dreams, not just for herself but for the world around her. And tragically, those dreams were cut short. Her death was a heartbreak, not only for her loved ones, but for the many people who had admired her from afar. Elena's untimely death marked the loss of a bright future, a future that could have helped so many. And yet, in the midst of such an overwhelming tragedy, it's impossible not to consider the weight of her final act. She had discovered a truth that could have brought down an empire, and she was willing to expose it, even at the cost of her own life. Her courage speaks volumes about the kind of person she was. She wasn't just a victim, she was a hero. But the victims of this trafficking network, those whose lives were torn apart by William's greed and exploitation, also deserve to be remembered. These individuals were not nameless or faceless. They were mothers, daughters, sons, and fathers, each with their own stories, their own aspirations. Many of them, like Elena, had been lured in with promises of a better life, only to have their freedom stolen away. One by one, survivors began to come forward, sharing their harrowing accounts of what had happened behind closed doors. Their stories are a testament to the human spirit, stories of survival against overwhelming odds, stories of strength and resilience that continue to inspire others. They fought not only for justice but for a future where no one else would have to endure what they had. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the systems that protect the powerful. For too long, wealth and influence have shielded those who engage in the most heinous of crimes. It's a sad reality that the rich and powerful often find themselves above the law, protected by their money, their status, and their ability to manipulate the system. But as this case has shown, justice can find its way, no matter how well hidden the truth is. The real question is, how do we prevent this from happening again? How do we ensure that those who are trafficked, those who are exploited, are not just statistics but are seen, heard, and given the chance to reclaim their lives? Elena's story, and the stories of so many others, must serve as a reminder to all of us. Vigilance is crucial. We cannot afford to look away, to dismiss these crimes as things that happen to other people. As long as we remain silent, as long as we allow the powerful to escape justice, we're complicit in the suffering of those who have no voice. But as this case has shown, sometimes the truth comes to light, no matter how deeply it's buried. And when it does, there are those who will stop at nothing to fight for it, to make sure it's heard. In the end, Elena's death was a tragedy, a life stolen before its time, but her courage will never be forgotten. And the victims of trafficking, both those whose names we know and those whose names we don't, will continue to fight for a world where justice prevails and the powerful cannot hide behind their wealth. In the wake of William's conviction, the once glittering image of the billionaire CEO crumbled. His empire, built on a foundation of tech innovation and charm, was now nothing more than a house of cards, destroyed by the weight of his own crimes. The courtroom witnessed his sentencing to life in prison, and though some whispered that justice had been done, the impact of this case would reach far beyond one man's fall from grace. The arrest of William was just the beginning. As the investigation continued, law enforcement was able to dismantle significant parts of the trafficking ring he had run for years. The connections to powerful figures, some of whom were still unknown, were severed, and several key players in the operation were arrested, bringing a semblance of justice to the victims. Yet, the full extent of the network's reach remains unclear, leaving the possibility of further revelations still looming. This case sent shockwaves through the community, forcing society to confront uncomfortable truths about the abuse of power. The victims, whose voices had long been ignored, were finally given the platform they deserved, and the case raised crucial awareness about the pervasive nature of human trafficking. No longer could the wealthy hide behind their status or use their power to protect themselves. This story has ignited a conversation, one that continues to challenge the systems that allow these atrocities to go unchecked. While William's conviction and the dismantling of part of his operation brought some closure, the lasting impact will be seen in the long-term change this case has sparked. It's a painful reminder that the battle against human trafficking is ongoing, and the fight for justice is never truly over. Now, as the echoes of this case continue to resonate, we want to hear from you. What do you think about this case? Could justice truly be served? Or are there still secrets hidden within the shadows, waiting to be exposed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story has made you think twice about the power structures in our society, or if you believe in the importance of raising awareness for those who cannot speak for themselves, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support our mission of spreading awareness about true crime and the pursuit of justice. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video, where the search for truth continues.